Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a regular normal screwdriver and you put it in right through here until it comes out this side over here, right in that corner right there, and then you pry on the caliper until it stops moving. And what we're basically doing is we're resetting, pushing the piston back inside the bore, right down inside here. Hopefully you can see that the piston is pushed all the way back in as far as it can go. So, and the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that our caliper slides back and forth nice and easily on these slide pins right here, because frequently these slide pins freeze up and it causes the brakes to stay applied and you prematurely wear out the brakes. In this case here, as you can see, they're sliding perfectly, so we know that the slide pins are good. We're going to lubricate them before you put it back together, but now we're going to take out these pins right here and we're going to continue with the brake job. So let's do that. We talked about we're going to take out these pins in the back right here, the slide pin bolts. We're going to remove them. Obviously it's counterclockwise to remove, clockwise to tighten. Sometimes when you try to take these out, as you turn it, you're going to see that this piece on the top here, as you try to turn the screw, you see that this piece here rotates at the same time. Okay, so when you try to turn this and this whole thing spins as it does here, you got to get that out of there. So what you're going to do is you're going to get in here with just a wrench, and you put the wrench on here like this, and you hold this wrench and you rotate this at the same time, and you can unscrew it right out, but this will hold that from turning. So let me do that and I'll show you how that goes. Okay, so you hold the back wrench and then you pull it and you break it loose, and once you break it loose you can just take it out by hand. Same thing on the lower bolt. You can just take that out by hand also. And we're going to use these bolts again later, so we'll hold on to them. We're just going to relocate the caliper out of the way for now, because we're going to be taking this mounting bracket off here. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to take out those bolts in the back of the bracket that I showed you previously. I'll get this socket on here and I'll show you where it is. Underneath the vehicle, this bolt here and this bolt here. We're going to take those two out and then we're going to remove this entire bracket from the car. Alright? Sometimes these are a little bit tight. We'll just put this to the side for now. We'll come back to this in a minute and I'll show you what we're going to do with that. Now the next thing we're going to do is we've got to get this rotor off here. A lot of times getting the rotors off, you can take a hammer and just tap on it and sometimes it'll pop off, which in this case it did pop off. But if it didn't, you could take a bolt and you could screw it right into here. There's a threaded hole in the back of the rotor here. You could screw this bolt into it there. You turn that bolt in and it'll push the rotor off the car. But in this case here, a couple of taps with the hammer and it came right off. So, you know, we're okay with that. Alright? And next thing we're going to do is just take the rotor off the car, obviously, and then we're going to get our replacement and we'll put it back on. And one thing you want to do too is the face of the rotor right in here You want to make sure there's no significant rusting on there, otherwise you're going to put it together and you're going to wind up with a pulsating brake pedal. So make sure that this face is clean here. You can use a piece of sandpaper or a disc or scraper or anything to get that rust off. In this case, it's nice and clean, so we don't have to worry about that. All right, so let's grab the new parts and we'll put this show back together and get it out the door. Okay, now that we have the mounting caliper off the mounting bracket off the car, we're going to remove the brake pads and we're going to reinstall the brake pads. So we take this off, and on a lot of these cars here, before you put them all back together, you want to pull these pins. Hard to do with one hand, but I'm going to show you. You pull these pins out. Pull these pins out. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to put this right over here so you can see. You pull these out of here, and you put a little bit of lube, brake lube, on these here so it slides nice and easy in the bore, so that your brakes don't stay applied, that they come off when they're required to. And we're going to do the same thing on this one here. A little bit of lube on here like this, and then we put it back inside like that, and it slides nice and easy. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to pry off these little metal pieces here, because we're going to replace them with new ones here. Always check to make sure there's not a significant amount of rust build up inside this area right here, and in this case it looks pretty decent. And then we're going to replace the new ones. What you do is you just push them on like this, and they snap right down where they belong. Same thing on this one. You pry this off like that, and then you just replace this with the new one also. Again, checking for rust. Make sure there's not a significant amount of rust in here, which is not. And we put this on here like this and just push it, and it snaps all the way in. Then what we do is you take a little bit of lube, brake lube, and we just grease up the area where the brake pad is going to slide on top and bottom like this. Alright, then we're going to take our brake pad and we'll just put the brake pad into the caliper mounting bracket where it belongs. Make sure it slides nice and easy. Sometimes it'll fall out when you go to put it on, but you stick it in there anyway. Then we match up the brake pad that we're going to put back on there, because the brake pads have different locations for the sensors on it. And this one here is the one that came off, so this is the one we're going to put back on. And we'll just put it back in here, make sure this slides in there nice and easy, which it fits in there nice and loosely. And that's it. And then we're going to put this back on the car, and then we'll mount it up. But I just want to show you one thing. We're going to be replacing the rotor, obviously. But what I want to show you is on the old rotor, down inside here, you're going to see there's a little rubber plug. Push that out, because we're going to need to put that in. We're going to need to put this plug back into this rotor here, right here. That's the adjustment for the parking brake. So make sure you put that plug back in there. Alright, and then we just put the rotor back on the car the way it came off. Let me put this camera down. Alright, and we line this piece up here with the groove here, where it came off, just like that. Push it all the way on, and then what we're going to do is we're going to reattach our mounting bracket, which you recall just goes on like this. You can slide it over the top like that, and then put your two bolts in the back that we previously took out, and screw them in by hand. You don't use a ratchet yet on it. Screw bolted them in by hand before you tighten everything up. Tighten them down as tight as you can by hand first. Same thing on the bottom. Then we'll grab our ratchet and tighten up the bolts pretty tight. Same thing on this one here. Nice and tight. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our caliper back on where we previously took it off. Sometimes what will happen is the caliper itself won't push over the top like this here. It doesn't fit. So in that case, what you have to do is you got to push this piston back in a little bit further. And the way you would do that is you put your brake pads into it and use a tool which actually recesses the piston that little bit that is remaining out. And the tool basically fits in between the two, like, I'll show you one second, I'll move my hand. The tool fits in here like this, and then it will push that piston that little bit back into the bore, enough to get it over the caliper. Alright, now that it's pushed in all the way, you're going to put the caliper back on. Make sure your brake line is not twisted, because if the brake line is twisted, you're going to have a problem. Slide this over the top like that, and line up your top and bottom bolts. Just catch them by hand. We're not going to tighten them tight now. Put them in by hand first. And once you have them in, you screw them down as far as you can by hand. And then we can tighten up the bolts. Now remember, this piece here rotated before when we took it off, so you may have to hold it with a wrench, see how it goes, and tighten it down. Okay, it didn't turn at all, so that's nice and tight. Now we're going to tighten up the upper one, which is the one that slid, that was rotating before, but we'll see how it goes. It's not rotating now. We're going to be replacing the front brakes. The way we're going to do that is we're going to get in here with a screwdriver, and we're going to attempt to push the pistons back in just a little bit, enough to get this caliper to pull right off. We're going to take out this bolt and this bolt, which are 14 millimeters, and we're going to go back behind the caliper where it mounts up onto to the knuckle here, and we're going to remove that bolt right there and the other bolt right up on top right there. So and then once we get those bolts out, we'll take this mounting bracket off the car, and once we get the mounting bracket off of the car, then we're going to remove the rotor from the car. In this case, we're going to be replacing the rotors because they're actually too far gone on the inside to do anything with them. So we can take a hammer to it and bang it off, or if we can't do that, right in here we can screw a bolt right into this threaded hole right here, and we can push the rotor off. So let me grab some tools and we're going to get started, and we'll see how it goes. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get in the back here, and we're going to just try to pry the piston back in just a little bit so that the caliper comes off. Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't, but you just want to get it pushed in far enough to get the caliper off the car. All right, we can take that bolt and loosen it. Same thing here. Loosen that bolt here. Both 14 millimeters. And then we take them totally out. Okay. Make sure these bolts in the back will take them out and keep them, because we're going to need to reuse them again. We're going to take our caliper off of the vehicle. And we're going to support it. We're not going to let it dangle. We'll let it hang up out of our way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be removing our brake pads and mounting bracket. These clips we're going to throw away because these spreader clips, we're going to be replacing these, so we don't need them. Right, then what we're going to do is in the back of the rotor, in the back of the mounting bracket I should say, we're going to take out those bolts that I showed you. All right, break a bolt loose. They're usually pretty tight. We can take these bolts all the way out. We're going to take the caliper off the car. The caliper mounting bracket, I should say. And we're going to keep these bolts because we are going to need to reuse them again. Same thing on the top one, take it totally out. Once you have the bolts out, just take the caliper off, the caliper bracket. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the rotor off the car or truck. Now, before you do anything, putting the new rotor back on, you have to make sure that all of this rust on here is cleaned off. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with a pulsating brake pedal. So let's clean that off, and I'll show you how that's going to be cleaned off. You can use sandpaper or whatever you've got. I'm going to use a disc that's on here made for that. You clean it off like that. Okay, we cleaned it off pretty well. Now we're just going to clean in the back right here, and we'll be all set. Alright, what I usually do is I put the rotor onto the car and I screw a lug onto it to hold it and stabilize it so it doesn't move around while I'm trying to mount the new brakes and the caliper bracket back onto the car. So just screw a lug nut on, it'll hold it fairly tight and keep it from slopping around too much. Alright, now let's get back to the caliper and putting the brake pads in, and we're also going to be replacing some of the hardware that comes in a hardware kit. So let's get over to the bench and I'll show you how that goes. Okay, now I want to show you how we're going to replace these clips here. These sometimes are a little bit of a pain to do because you have to try to squeeze everything back in there. Alright, first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these slide pins right here. And we're going to lubricate them before we put the caliper bracket back onto the car. Just a little bit of lube, like this, and it makes it slide nice and easily so that it doesn't bind up and cause a problem. Same thing on this one here. This one is actually a little bit frozen. That's why you want to lubricate it so it doesn't stick. Right, like this. And then you'll notice it slides nice and easy as it's supposed to. See? Put the correct lube on there. It works really well. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to be removing. Okay. Then we're going to be replacing these clips right here. So you just pry them out with a screwdriver. Take them out of here. They sometimes a little rusty. They pop out. Get in here with a screwdriver and you can get them right out. All right. Then what I always do is inside here you have a lot of rust inside here on these. Just clean it up a little bit so you have a good surface for the new clips to go up against. If you don't have a file, use sandpaper to clean it out a little bit. All right, and then we're going to replace the clips with the ones that came out. And they just snap right in like this, and they push right in just like that. And the same thing on this side over here. We're going to reinstall this clip right here. It just pushes right in. These little tabs fit right over the shoe. I mean the bracket. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to be replacing this one here and this one also. Alright, we clean it up a little bit just to clean the rust. Alright, that's it. Then we're going to put the new clips back in now. Match them up, the ones that came out. As you can see, this is not the right one for that side, but it is the right one for this side, right? And then we just put it in and push it down. Same thing, put it in and push it down. Then we take a little bit of the grease and we put it right here where the brake pad is going to slide, like that. Same thing on the top, right? Just enough to lubricate it. Then we take our brake pad. Now we know this was the outer brake pad. We're going to put this clip here back onto the outer brake pad. We're not going to use this one, but we're going to install the new one that came with the hardware kit. It's a good idea to always change the hardware whenever you do these jobs. All right, you put the clip on. Sometimes it's a little bit of a pain because it's greasy, but it snaps right in, just like that. So now we know that this is going to be our outer brake pad. This is going to be our inner brake pad, because we saw where the caliper pistons were touching. We're going to put the clip on the top, right up here, the same way that it came off. We put it back on. And what we're going to do is, we know that this is the inner brake pad because we have it like this, and we know this is the inner one. And now we're going to put it right back into the caliper here. This is a little bit tough sometimes. If you put it in sideways and you push this piece in first, it'll go in a little bit easier. Alright, as you can see, it is a pain in the rear end getting these in there, but that's what it should look like when it's back in there. So let me get the other one in here, and then we'll bring it right back over to the car, and we'll install it back on the car. Have patience though, it is frustrating. And we're in, and we just tap it down. And that's it. That basically keeps the brake pad from rattling inside here. Alright, so let's bring it back over to the car, and we're going to get this job wrapped up. Okay, now we're back to putting the caliper back onto the car. Those clips are a little bit of a pain in the rear end, so I'm sure you're a little frustrated from that. And then when you get the caliper back onto the car, just squeeze the pads in so that they don't pop out by accident. And then you catch the bolts that we previously took out in the back of the rotor, the 17 millimeters. Tighten them in, and then you grab your ratchet, and tighten the bolts up, holding the brake pads in so they don't pop out. You caught them as tight as you could by hand, and now you're going to tighten them up all the way with the ratchet as tight as it goes. Keep those pads in there so they don't pop out. And tighten up the second bolt. Nice and tight. Check your bottom bolt one more time, make sure. Nice and tight. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to switch the light over so you can see. Okay, we're going to be installing these new spreader clips that came with it. There's tiny little holes in the top of each brake pad and the bottom of each brake pad. These actually fit inside here like this. And then you spread it and you put it into the second hole right there. Hold the brake pads in because those spreader clips are going to push it out. Now I'm going to show you what I do to make it a little bit easier for you. You remember you hung your caliper. We're going to take our piece off of here, and then what we're going to do push the caliper back into the bore. You can use a C-clamp to do it. You can use any kind of a spreader. They sell lots of different ones in the stores. You put your brake pads in and you push the pistons all the way back into the bore as far as they can go. Push it all the way in nice and easy. And then once you push them in all the way as far as they can go, I might add, if these pistons don't push in easily and they stick, you need to change the caliper also. Alright, then we can take this tool back off. These are the old brake pads, so we're going to discard them now. What I normally do to make it a little bit easier, because you're going to try to hold these in here and it's going to be very difficult. Lay the caliper back in where it belongs. Put the top bolt in and just catch it. You don't have to tighten it, just catch it in there. A couple of threads. And then just rotate your caliper up and out of the way like this. You take your spreader clips and you install the top spreader clips. Hold the brake pads here. You don't want them popping out. Otherwise you're going to have to deal with getting them back in where they belong again into those clips there. Alright, you put that one in like that. And then you come to the bottom one. And you do the same thing. You put the bottom one in. Like that. Right? Holding the brake pads in now. Rotate your caliper back down where it belongs. And now that keeps the brake pads from popping open and dislodging from where it belongs. Alright, you screw it in as tight as you can by hand. And then you get on here with your 14mm ratchet and tighten it up. Sometimes that slide pin in the back sticks a little or spins. You can just hold it with your finger or a wrench. Most of the time you can hold it with your finger. I always have a wrench with me just in case to hold it. But, you know, we're good. All right, tighten it up. No, we're not good. It actually is spinning, so. What you do is you get in here with a wrench and you hold the the slide pin in the back. Tighten it up. Same thing on the top. Tighten it up. And you snug it. That's it. All right.